Oh, there we go. I think everything's working now. How's everyone?
Great, thanks.
Perfect.
Yep, it's live.
Great.
Sorry, I was like, what's going on? I used the wrong code. Oh my God, is it live? What's going on? Always
Great to be here this morning.
Always seems like something. But anyway, we're good.
Yeah, I can hear.
Awesome. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to episode 85 or 95.
Hello,
oh my
hello.
God. 95.
Wow.
That's actually quite a bit. So
It's a good reminder to plan a
almost 100.
100 show. Yeah.
yeah, well,
Right.
that's I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we can make that a Monty show. So,
100th episode. Let's shoot for it.
yeah, get the Sapphire Project boys on. But today we're doing something a bit different. We're doing the whole Sci-Fi polyphase. I like that. That was Ramon's idea to do the word polyphase because he wanted to sort of make sure that we're not being exclusive to anything, but mostly inclusive to electrical ideas in science fiction, and not just where they come from. Like, we're not looking at it from that point of view, not the ideas themselves, but now to what we can envision a future being. If, like, it's sort of like one of those memes, if Tesla got his way, and you see the future and it's just like everyone's in flying cars type of thing, one of those. That's where I'm going for here. So, well, let me introduce who we have. We have, of course, James, Buddy, Sean. Hey, Sean. We have the Duffster. We have Rick and Chris from Take Back Space. Say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
I knew that was going to
Hi,
happen.
everybody.
You're like this. You're predictable. Yeah, like it's like the Corsican Brothers type thing. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm not getting anything on Skype though.
We got to learn to do it like the Three Stooges. Hello, hello, hello.
You're not getting anything on Skype there, James?
But maybe
No,
for the 100th episode, we'll get that down.
I see everything.
Well, yeah, I'm not seeing anything on the on both screens. So whatever that is.
Oh, I'm only showing. Yeah, I'm not doing anything on Skype. I'm going to actually just be showing it. I'll share my screen. I didn't even get that done yet. Let me go ahead and start sharing. There we go. Actually, I might even. Well, I can't share with sound, otherwise you'll hear yourselves. So that'll just create an echo chamber of disastrous proportions. So you should be seeing yourselves, and now I'll make it like you're seeing that. And there we go. All right. Well, without further ado, I'm going to actually just start the preview because it's going to let everyone know what's really going on. We have a few people filtering in, don't we? Is that correct? I see that we have a few here.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's good.
Yes,
oh,
we
yeah,
have,
Smash is here, too. Area Wolf.
Area Wolf,
my buddy Phil. Sully's here. Oh,
Scott
awesome.
Ferguson, Polly B, Sully Z. Welcome, all yous.
This is great. Michael Wise. Oh, this is great. Or Vice, depending on, if it's like Rachel Vice or whatever.
Yep. Michael just popped in.
Well, let me go ahead and get everything rolling then, because it's great to have everyone here, and it's obviously we have 22 people. It's even more pouring in, so let's go ahead and get that going. If I can remember how to do this, like I'm intelligent, and this is my plan, and I've done this before like a million times.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I see that Solo Sailing Boat Life is here. He just popped onto the Discord a few days ago. So welcome. William Armand Sosa, welcome.
Welcome to the October 13th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we are making our space colonization Birkeland Polyphase Superweb episode. We are exploring science fiction tropes and ideas for upcoming Electric Universe productions. Movies, novels, songs, television. Fiction attached to the Electric Universe science is the goal here, and we want to hear from you.
Looks like things are going well. All right. Well, let's get to it. Now, I had a few things that I first really want to talk about, like just to give us an idea on where we are. And my first instinct was to go to sort of give us a little of a history lesson. I don't think any of us are really old enough for a true history lesson, but the way that it seems to be working, and that quote that I put right in the chat there, which is just me saying it. It's not really a quote. I don't know why I put quotes around it, but it was, the future is built on our imagination. We have not yet begun to dream. The idea behind that just popped into my mind with that was, if we are talking about the future and what they were looking forward to just a couple hundred years ago, the idea was that they were actually looking for far off lands, or, the sea. Before that, the sea was all you had for mystery. The stories that people would take back from their travels would be, the only entertainment there was besides like books. But the common people didn't have all these until much more recent, So here we are looking at, in the Sherlock Holmes era, they're looking at, taking a train to India. That's like science fiction almost. To go to Africa, like down to Egypt type of ideas. Now, correct me if anyone thinks that I'm talking completely wrong here, but that's where you start getting 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then the Time Machine just sort of popped out from Jules Verne. And so I was...
let me throw in some dates there. So
okay, go ahead. Yeah,
Victorian era, like 1840s through the early 1900s. Time Machine pops up around 1895. And
so with cars, so basically technology allowed him the idea that we could do something like this. If we can make a horseless carriage, we can do anything.
This could be very tangential right out the gate, but there's this book that I've read on the Take Back Space show called Somnium. That's from Johannes Kepler, and it's from 1608 or 1634 when it was published, and it talks about going to the moon by waiting for an eclipse and waiting at a certain point in Earth, balling yourself up and floating through a tunnel created between Earth and the moon. So this is like one of the earliest pieces, like 400 years ago, 500 years ago.
No, you're absolutely, well, yeah, 400 years ago, but someone was talking about this. Unless I'm insane, was not someone just mentioning this exact situation of people traveling back and forth to the moon?
Yes, sir, it was me. I suppose that some Martians there may have been, physical live beings on Mars that were transferred in the glow connection
yeah, that was
between Mars and the Mountain of God, right?
Yeah, which that's the sort of the pillar to the star. But I was thinking I would have a good time and explore this aspect of it on basically from this point forward. When we started entering into the Star Trek realm, that sort of took over the collective consciousness and put us on a direct path that it was inferring simply to make a story better. It was just doing what science fiction is supposed to do, right?
Right. Going back to that for 1 second, what leads me to believe that is all the old tales from a lot of different cultures, not only the Bible, of falling beings, fallen angels, talking about beings falling from the ground. Some of them died, some of them dead, some of them still alive, some of them died on impact. It's everywhere in cultures, early tales, and
it's everything in modern tales. Frogs have reigned in the 19th century or in the 20th century.
Yeah, and fish have fallen from the skies.
So we should not be surprised about that if something was stronger.
It actually goes to the polar configuration, the different kinds of, since all the planets were connected together, different forms of life from all the planets could take a ride into it. In fact, I think it was Graham that said there was a tribe in South America who said they were the descendants of the ones that actually did the death. You would take the dead down to Mars and bury them there, rather than that. And then they got caught in here when the polar configuration broke up.
Disconnected. Yeah. Well, it's kind of, it takes a lot of ancient knowledge of figuring out, making connections, and trying to understand what happened actually. And like when I saw symbols of an alien sky, I said, well, there's it. This is the key to just about everything in ancient history.
Well, it's up there. It answers a lot of questions. I don't see nearly as many enigmas. I mean, in fact, almost no enigmas. There's things that seem to fall into place very clearly under this paradigm. Yes.
Well, it raises a lot of questions too. And that's
like
the beautiful
traveling
thing
to another
about
planet, like you just were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Birkeland current was real, could you imagine you're going there and you're actually sailing towards this thing, and you see a ship? You're in Greenland, you see a ship sail towards this stuff, and it literally gets lifted off into the sky, and they're getting to go to Mount Olympus. We get to go there if we get to go, and let's get to go there. No, you're gonna friggin' die. Like, you're not living through that. I mean, you have no reason to think that. I mean, you'll think that this is heavenly and beautiful, but I'm positive that those people are just going to be like instantly vacuum sealed. I can't picture it ending well.
Yeah, not fun making a transit from one planet to another.
That's a whale. I believe it or not, I could picture easier. Spiders, as William Allen Sosa mentioned. Yeah, that's actually not possible.
That's where the water bridge comes from when Jupiter was in closer to the sun and all of its moons were liquid.
Well, I don't know if it would actually be water. Like, the amount of water it would actually take to be something that we consider the density of the ocean. We would take all the water right off the planet. But the idea of it being something that could be seen that was filled with moisture, like, or thicker atmosphere than zero atmosphere, yes.
Well, if both bodies were wet and warm, there would become a water bridge if they got close enough. And I could see giant mammals swimming across the bridge.
The water bridge is a small effect. I mean, yes, it should be noted that would be a description of a physical Birkeland current. Just like we're probably going to find out later that lava tubes have similar properties on the inside. Just like we see that the currents traveling in a wire or in motors will have certain points which will have higher charge and less charge and so forth. And we see those type of currents in, like we saw the dragonstone in the rock there, that type of idea. We've seen it. But it's not necessarily something that's like, it's not like the amount of water to go so many millions of kilometers between planets, or even hundreds of thousands, just to the moon. It would take all the water right off the planet. I mean, it's not that much water on our planet. It's only 5 miles deep, like, at the most. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of it was vaporized, and a lot of it was lifted as oxygen, hydrogen, water molecules into space, and it looked beautiful, green or whatever was going on. Positive that. But whether or not it was survivable, but this is science fiction, right? So
well, we're taught the topic is science fiction, but I think it might have happened.
No,
6.5 kilometers of Mars.
Ted Holden believes this very strongly. I mean, he's totally into that.
We understand that Mars oscillated back and forth between Venus and Earth a bunch of times.
Yes, that was the labors of Hercules, yes. Yeah. And each time he started messing around with something. He did something while he was down there doing his labors. Yeah, I get that. But it doesn't, like, survivable is what we're talking about. Like, I'm actually very strongly thinking that something like we know that bugs, like insects, existed for a long time. They have the 6 legs, so that's kind of messed up for us. But they have wings. Okay, so are they eight-legged creatures? And what other eight-legged creatures do we see? And since they don't conform to our ideas of life on this planet, like octopuses and stuff, are they from somewhere else? Now that's entirely plausible.
You know what Jules Verne said? Jules Verne said, "I believe cats to be spirits come to Earth. A cat, I'm sure, could walk on a cloud without coming through." So there you go.
You know, that's
Jules Verne said it first.
there is a mystical attraction to the cat because, let's face it, it has the capricious nature of gods, but is not dangerous to us.
Well, the big ones are, but
Yeah, but that's not what he's talking about. I mean, yes, I mean, he might be talking about how beautiful they are, but let's be honest, unless it's a cheetah, big cats would tend to be quite dangerous.
Can I bring up a point? I was watching the Alex Fournier Electricity of Life talk that I'd mentioned a couple of times, and I
Yes.
think it's from this one where they induce a charge in tadpoles that grows an eyeball on the tadpole's tail, talking about basically creating organs from...
Did you link that?
Let me try and find that. That's what I'm looking for while I'm
okay.
talking about it. But it's basically
Well,
talking about like how human creatures and humans basically are modalities of the same sort of tentacles kind of coming out, but essentially charge densities create organs. You know, there's the harmony organs. You know,
Yeah.
like you
it
play into the
changes
home.
it changes the genetics and opens up the genetics to do different things that it's not really
This is one of
supposed
the
to do for
major
that creature.
concerns that we had about, or that I had about going to another planet. Whatever you grew outside, I mean, if it's inside of the Earth's field, like even on the moon, it might still be Earth-like. But I don't know what it would be like if it grew up on Mars. What I mean, besides the different environmental conditions and gravity and so forth, what the different harmonies and the different electric field, what would a biological organism if DNA is simply resonating into life, what would it turn into? It's in a different field. That's always been fascinating to me.
Well, seems like the people on YouTube are agreeing with us that cats are aliens.
I saw that, yes.
Michael, Wild Alchemical Spirits, and Michael, and I saw, remember, and H.D. Armstrong. He didn't agree with that, but I'm just saying hi.
Well, it's true though that if we are looking at gods in the sky and we know that they had plasma wrapped around them, they occasionally shot out lightning bolts at each other and got pissy at each other, and we didn't know if they were going to, you know, be benevolent or devastating to us when they came by. You know, that's very cat-like. Like, I mean, literally, that's cat-like. So to think that cats are gods made flesh, yeah, I mean, they're gonna either they're gonna knock that off the table whether you like it or not, and they don't care, you know. And if you go to rub their tummy, they'll like it for like so long, then they'll kill you. So
2 seconds.
yeah. So this is kind of like, I can picture that connection. You know, why would you worship cats? Because they act like the gods. No matter what you try, you can throw them against the wall and they're still going to act exactly like that.
Just a continuation.
And they have those 9 lives too. Sorry, Chris. Go.
No worries. Just the connections between things. Just noted a comment. Polly B says, "How will we use Birkeland currents to get around locally and galactically?" And then Solo Sailing Boat Life says, "Electric Universe Slipstream Drive." And I find those comments interesting, but also spiders already use that, and bees already use magnetic field lines to navigate. I mean, we essentially do with GPS.
I just read that. I was reading that the other day.
I didn't know this.
Chris.
It's all about opposing charge to move through space.
No, that's how to make.
And the birds use the birds can actually see the field with a protein inside of their eye. So
That's actually
yeah,
a really good question, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get Panorpheus on here. Panorpheus is one of the few authors who are working in electric universe circles, and he has some published novels, and as the electric universe grew, he himself has become more and more into these theories and the questions that you're asking. How do we get through space? He asked of me a few years ago, and some of those ideas were put into novel form. The the idea of what would happen if you live on another planet. That was something he faced, but he's looking at it in a longer view, because the main characters of his story are thousands of years old. They're immortals, so including people like Tesla and Aristotle and stuff like that, I think. So it's very fascinating, and the ideas of building other cultures on other planets by people who were alive during what we consider the ancient civilizations is a wonderful tie-in mentally to the entirety of it all. But
sounds like Stargate.
Well, okay, maybe. Who's clicking, by the way? I just hear click, 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 click.
Not I, said
It's
the
me.
cat.
Sorry.
Okay.
Neil, I was going to tie the whole magnetic field lines. We essentially orbital mechanics follow these field lines as well, and I think that spacecraft currently, even like the real world space programs, do run on Birkeland filaments and magnetic fields. Whether or not we interpret it that way, people are like, oh, we got a gravity assist around Earth and then we hauled ass to Mars. But really, if you follow the trajectories, these craft have magnetometers. They're testing where they are within the magnetic field. And it's likely, in my opinion only, that we already have a space program that does take advantage of following field lines to get to planets and space.
Yeah, I believe you're right, Chris. I believe there is some influence on all matter inside a solar system or a solar's magnetic sphere of influence. But inertia does, and gravity does have a lot more play inside that field. But once you get outside the field, like Voyager 10 and 12, was it? Once you get outside there, I think things change a little bit, and there's probably more influence on your craft as you get outside the solar system's influence. Then you have to deal with what charges are out there and apply opposing charge to your ship to move in that field of influence.
Okay, I see what. Well, it's true that we actually have a environment where we know some things are violations, but we don't, like, they're anomalies. We were talking about the possibility that the properties of matter are different depending on your environment. That's basically Halton Arp's idea. I would be wrong to attribute to anyone else at the moment, but and if there is someone, I apologize for not including you. But basically, Halton Arp said the electron density or something is making this body, this quasar, appear to be so far away when actually it was just ejected from this galaxy. Okay. No, go ahead.
Can I make a note? Yeah, just visually, the way I interpret Halton Arp's concept, the quantization of light, this idea that light steps instead of is a linear, exponential curve, it means that potentially our optics are affected the same way. Something that might seem so far away on a linear curve in a quantized way might be much closer. Now, we're not saying like 10 miles away. We're talking about millions and billions of miles, but not trillions and quintillions of miles.
Right.
Light years.
Well, and of course, to lend credence to the problem is that Halton Arp pointed out very correctly that a quasar, if it is at its proposed distance, would be supernatural in power because of its small size. It has more power than a galaxy, but yet it's as small as a light year across. That is preposterous.
Well, it would have a massive magnetic field that would be interacting with the magnetic field of the parent galaxy.
Well, yeah, but they don't think that they're even in the same ballpark because remember, redshift equals distance. So they are millions of miles or millions of light years behind the other galaxy that they are supposedly in ARP
But they're
field
not.
ejected from. I know. So the question becomes then about what we're talking about, getting into spacecraft and the properties of matter and light and so forth. Well, taking that to an understanding, we do see similar but less extreme effects with Mercury. Mercury, somehow its orbit is wrong, and we see anomalous accelerations and so forth. Another one is with Jim pointed out comets. They spiral around like a flower around the sun as the orbits never go back to the same spot. So they're getting an angular push in one direction, probably from the right-hand rule, but that's just an anomaly. Another one is the spacecraft anomalies where when they go so far away from a planet, sometimes apparently their mass changes. That's a big clue right there. And the Pioneer anomaly is nothing short of that, I think. So we're seeing potential changes based on your charge potential, apparently, and which seems to also be the case with comets and gas giants in the sun, if that's also the case. These would mean, and we talked about this before, other properties of matter. Well, if this is true, then how do you carry your own properties with you? How do you alter properties of matter? And if you were going into another galaxy, what would happen if all of the properties of every material in your ship, including your own body, are now different?
I think this is the problem we have with the definition of mass.
I agree, 100%.
So, and I've always had difficulties with Gauss's law because it says that if you know its mass, you know its distance. Well, that doesn't work very well with the difference between Jupiter and Mars. It's like the Earth is between it. So Mars should be bigger because that's the way they define it. But then I realized all these things that we were talking about in a previous episode, that the moon was being somewhere between 106 and 108 widths apart from it. The 108 seems to be the idealized form, but let me see, where was I going with this? The guys, it doesn't make sense until you say the distance between, or the distance is due to its charge. That makes perfect sense. If you know its distance, you know its charge. If you know its charge, you know its distance. That makes perfect sense.
Well, if you know it within the if you were going in the if you were imagining the solar system, the heliopause, as a cell and the star as a nucleus, then the potential along the gradient out towards the edge of the cell or the heliopause, that would be generally true. If you knew how far away it was and its general size, you might be able to predict its mass, but there'll be some other variables in there, like does it have a high iron content to concentrate lines of force or something? There could be stuff like that.
But that's the whole point, is that the idea, the definition of mass is what's causing us to have all these problems.
Oh, yes,
Because
certainly.
You said you have to have iron. Well, no.
You don't have to.
Well, yeah, but it's the idea of mass being something hard.
Oh,
solid.
no, let me correct myself. What I meant was the property of iron is that soft iron naturally confines magnetic fields. For bodies to have high magnetic fields, like the sun, for example, indicates, to me anyway, that there's some iron content in there. Doesn't mean that it's all iron. Obviously, it's spiraling, that's what creates this field, likely, as it goes down towards the equator, or depending on if you like conventional or natural, electric current, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, the sun works on that principle. If it has more iron in it, and it will concentrate the field lines better, just as a natural consequence. That's all I meant, not in any mass-related issue.
Yeah, but I'm saying our definition of mass is getting in the way of us understanding how it actually works.
Correct. I've often thought about E equals mc squared in relationship to this C. If we change C, if C is a different speed, basically because of electron density or whatever charge potential, as ARP may describe it, then speed is different, then the properties of M is different, but also all the resonances of all the molecules and their properties are different. If you know what I mean, like it cascades.
Yeah, and you don't really have to use time and light in that equation.
No, just E equals mc squared straight. Like, I mean, if you like, because we know that the energy potential in something, if M is like, we put M on one side, you know, like, and we take it, and we know it, so now it's E over c squared. So it's an inverse proportion to mass, which is what we thought. So basically, if the light inside the sun is slower because of some reason, then mass is apparently less. That's messed up.
Yeah, because like I said, our idea of mass being something physically hard like metal or something, when it's all just vibration, and the Gauss law is basically saying it's just really.
Well, we have a word for it. We have it. It's called specific gravity. I mean, that's
Neil.
That's the real.
Let me ask you a question as an electrical engineer.
No. Okay. Yes.
Do electrons move through different medium at different speeds?
Yes.
Well, then that would make sense.
Electron obviously goes through metal
densities.
a lot easier than it does through, say, a semiconductor, or even I wouldn't say non-conductor, because, you know, but they do have a potential. Even an electric field between two capacitor plates with nothing in between, just air, would have a slow leakage across it, because the field would still try to reach, and there would be probably something equivalent to, if we looked in slow motion or somehow were able to look at it in a different field, we might see Birkeland currents jumping like tornadoes between the plates every now and then, as they tried to step their way down to this next plate, and so on and so on. But
we would
So
see
then,
that
yeah,
with X-rays, right? Like X-ray and gamma. Like different telescopes really do take those nebular clouds. I mean, if you see the Chandra Observatory, those do show what you're talking about.
We really have to see, like, I mean, we have to remember that these people, right up until just like 1910, were only using visible light, and everything was black and white, you know, and you know, they were guessing colors and stuff like that. But here we are now, looking at this, and
So, well, my question would be then that the electron density theory out in space may have some worthiness, no?
yes. Oh, yes. I would think that what should be the most important thing for us to do is not deny that, like, that gravity is changing, and try to attach it to something that is also changing, so we no longer notice the difference. That's not going to help us at all, because years later, someone's going to go, I wonder why they thought a meter was 3.3 meters. That's weird, isn't it? Very weird. Because it's not, because you're using all these constants, and the thing has changed over time, and so your calculations are wrong now. Now, that's an extreme example, because you'd have to be off by such a high number. But the end result, though, is we're looking at the principles of we're obfuscating these anomalies instead of investigating them. We should go right straight and go, why is this thing not the same weight every time we weigh it? It's supposed to be the mass that everything is based on, and it's different every time. We get one from another part of the world and bring it over to these ones. They meet each other, and they're not the same weight. Why? This is not something you ignore.
Mass,
you freaking
but
know
mass
this.
and weight are different, right?
I know, but I was saying weighing because of the nature of the action.
I just like to say these astronauts look way different than the ones we have today.
No, I think these are great astronauts. These are French astronauts.
Un moment, monsieur. Actually, while you're still on this, the voyage de la Lune, dans la Lune.
It's actually
earlier
over,
you
but
had
that's okay.
you had there's an interesting array of hats in this little movie. So the first group of people are all wearing cone hats, which, you know, an allusion to the polar configuration possibly. And
Oh
then you
yes,
have
wizards.
top hats and then flat hats, all of them have really interesting, you know, symbology through the scenes.
I want to get.
And then Venus shows up when they're on the moon.
my friend Carol Winter, who we met in 2016 on a geology tour, has written a novel or book about, and I have to get back to her, on women and the way that the polar configuration and the events of catastrophism have affected women, particularly women, because of this exact thing that we're looking at here. You'll have to look no further than a Presbyterian idea, or perhaps maybe your mental idea of Anne and Green Gables, or perhaps maybe the mental idea of an Irish woman from Rob Roy. You know, like, you have the hair has to be tied, and you have the two Birkeland currents as your braids. You know, you are yourself wearing the cone. You are the cone. You have the Venusian hair. And of course, after Venus attacked, your hair had to be tied down. And that was very clear in Japan. I mean, they wouldn't even let women run anymore because they were scared of what this meant. Like, and that hasn't ended at all. I mean,
we perpetuate those myths and those legends through the way civilizations treat the opposite sex, for sure.
Now, of course, it's not every culture, don't get me wrong, but it does seem to be predominant. A lot of cultures do have this thread running through them. So when I see that, I see things like this, like the cone heads and the things that people are wearing. I mean, half the symbols in this room are that. I mean, just look at the way it's positioned here. You have the Saturn symbol on the left pillar. You have the two pillars, of course, being the two pillars of God on either side of the polar configuration, and they themselves arranged in a pyramid leading up to the light at the end of the tunnel, which a telescope is pointing to a star. Like, I mean, all of this is just a Renaissance transformation of the myth. And I said I wouldn't do this. But we're doing it. So I feel bad.
Well, it's if you think in terms of creating something like this, every single piece of it is handcrafted. So there's intent behind all of it by default almost.
That's what I loved about houses, like my grandmother's house. Like, why did every single bedpost have a large ball on it?
Yeah, they weren't doing this. None of this was done mindlessly.
All the windows above doors, there were two pillars and a circular window and a triangle piece for the door. That's the Saturn archway for a temple or everything since the end of time. Or beginning of time, I guess.
I was talking about where architecture reflects history and history reflects religion, and those resonant moments where we have in our culture, we have things that resonate with us, and sometimes those resonant ideas work in our favor, and sometimes they work against us. It's not that resonant sense that we have of this is inherently true, or this is inherently
this
real,
is all true.
This inherently makes sense. Like, that sense that we have of things being true, that's something that I think can work to our advantage and work against us as a culture. And I mean,
obviously it can work against us. Look how scared we get.
Video, they're telling a story, and there are obviously many stories being told. That's the essence of storytelling. I mean, if people
there's layers, yes, that's what makes a good theater.
There's
yes,
always layers.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's interesting about I don't know how many of you have been
like a Disney movie. You're seeing one thing, and the kids are seeing another. Yeah. Like
Have you been to Disneyland, Neil? Have you been there before?
No, I have not. But
okay,
let me quickly just say something quickly. Wizard of Oz, a perfect example. It's all about gold and the takeover of money and the man behind the curtain that's controlling everything. And you have the soldier, you have the farmer, you have the modern woman at the time, and you have the factory worker, and all of them are going.
Have been written for sure.
Yeah, and that's it. And so in that vein, A lot of things are like that, where there's a hidden lower meaning. So
Absolutely, and by nature is what I'm saying. It's not. We're not discovering all this by
right.
accident. This is by intent, and you know, I was mentioning Disneyland. And there's an interesting part of Disneyland that is called Futureland.
Okay.
And
Futurama.
And yeah, it's always struggled in Disneyland in California. That's kind of, it should be one of the most interesting parts of Disneyland, and yet it has some of the least attendance of any of the lands in the park. And they've reinvented it and reinvented it. And one of the things that they call them Imagineers.
Is this like Tomorrowland? Like
yeah,
that George Clooney movie?
Yeah, but they call in France it's called it's different, but here in America it's Tomorrowland, I guess is what they call it, Futureland or whatever. Anyway,
well, no, there's a George Clooney movie with it. That's all.
They can't, and the same thing happened with Epcot Center. They tried to memorialize the future, and what they realized was that they couldn't, because the future was constantly changing and making their little playland irrelevant or odd or out of place somehow.
Yeah,
in other words,
the only way to absorb that is to incorporate that into, like, basically to laugh at your own anachronism, which is basically what this is now for us. We're laughing about this.
They made it like classic futurism.
Yes. Okay. Yes, that's a good.
Told from the past.
Yeah, that's good.
And so they were able to overcome in French Disneyland. That's how they did it.
Of
but
course.
The American Disneyland, they've never been able to sort of overcome the theming.
Well, because
it doesn't work in reverse. It's one of these weird things.
No, you're absolutely right. I've actually seen that. That's one of the things that I find weird. And it's not just like it's in regards to media. Do you ever know that you go to a place and everyone's having fun and the songs are fun, okay? And because they're not taking themselves too seriously. But then you go to a nightclub and all of them are like, yeah, no, girl, I'm going to get, yeah, I'm too cool, yeah, that kind of shit. You know, and you're like, what the hell did I just walk into? It's like an immature version, and you're trying to basically one group can laugh at itself. And when you're trying to talk about the future as it's something like to propel people forward in a vision, you're right, it would fall flat because of these reasons.
Let me throw something in there about music.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Neil? You want to finish your thought, though?
Oh, I'm done.
Yeah. No, just the idea that the 70s that like had disco music, like walking into a club today feels very cynical and disturbing in a way. But the 70s was about Xanadu, was about ancient Egyptian archaeology. I mean, think Earth, Wind, and Fire. Every disco song that was really uplifting and just this dancey kind of pop music, if you really read the themes were all about cosmic exploration, self-identity, really like esoteric and advanced concepts. And today we have really dumbed down idiotic
the
concepts
good drugs
because
were.
of cynicism.
No,
right.
I was 2 in 75, so. No, go on. I didn't want to stop you.
No. Just that was the thought. It's just that we do have a culture today that rides off the cynicism of culture. I mean, given that we're talking about the science fiction movies, especially like Tomorrowland. Spoilers, it ends with Hugh Laurie being like, typically saying like, oh, mankind sucks, we got to just annihilate everybody. It's the Thanos syndrome. Every science fiction movie basically
what is that?
A villain who just, like mankind sucks, we freaking suck, and everybody sucks, so kill everybody.
That's exactly my point.
That's nihilism.
You're right.
That's terrible.
Yeah,
Self-deprecation.
No, it absolutely is nihilism. And my question to you guys is this.
The Fifth Element did it. We don't have to do it anymore.
Is our current culture affecting our capacity to have science fiction? Is our current world affecting our ability to dream in multicolor, rainbows? Is it, are we being dampened? Is our science fiction that we're creating today being negatively colored by our current life experience to the extent that our dreams, our visions of the future, and our science fantasy is being affected? And I mean, I think the overwhelming answer to that question is yes. And that's bullshit. And I hate the answer to that. My
answer here is that's why I do my show. I got really sick of it. I was like, damn it, there are no real shows about like scientists pulling up pictures of actual planets and talking about actual science future, not science, because science fiction, I think we've really hit what do they call it? Like critical mass. I mean, there's only so many stories you can make up until the real science actually becomes interesting. So doing a show
look at the Star Trek series. I mean,
Yes.
the latest Star Trek movies are brilliant to watch, but they're very fucking dark. Excuse my language.
And devoid
Sorry about
of Star Trekkiness.
of heart, of idealism, of a future where problems have been solved and solutions have been implemented. That is no longer the theme of current Star Trek.
There's no morals to any stories nowadays. Like any cartoons, anything. There's no moral to it. It's just like okay, well, that was what it was, and it made me feel kind of depressed and like alone.
Acquisition and consumption.
Let us be fair that obviously people with vision will create something with heart or something like that. I mean, I think we can all agree with that, and it's something that resonates. But the truth is that we saw the devolution. Well, actually, we saw the evolution and devolution of technobabble in one generation. We saw the evolution of it through Star Trek, because before that, I mean, tell me how many technobabble things that weren't like, I don't know of any. Technobabble wasn't something that was done. So now we have technobabble, and we have basically, this is the idea that science fiction can solve all our problems. Extreme in Star Trek The Next Generation. Moving on, starts to disappear in the, well, it's still there in Voyager, but totally gone. I mean, it's going away and being mocked in Stargate. And it's completely gone in Battlestar Galactica. They're just basically going, all right, we have guns, we will shoot them, they will fire missiles at us, and when I say jump, we move to a new scene. How's the jump drive work? Don't talk about this. Just wire it up. Thank you very much. Jump. And that's it. That's the show. Like, I mean, there's no...
Look at Stargate, the original
gone.
Stargate.
Oh, I love that movie.
Right? The end of that movie, though, turns into our typical Hollywood schmodown, which is like, oh, I got a nuclear weapon, I'm going to destroy this thing that we just spent all this time trying to get to. The instant reaction to like science now is destroy it. And that's, I think, part of the powers that be basically saying, don't look, we're playing with the high-tech toys, you guys all suck.
Actually, I don't think that's it at all. I think it's very clear why it happens. I know it sounds terrible, but please let me tell you why it happens. It's not anything as sinister as that. If you have a lot of money and you spend a lot of it building awesome sets, and then you're doing all this stuff, by the end of it, you're going to have to put this in mothballs anyway. Just blow it up. So they blow up the set of the Enterprise. They blow up this stuff to just get rid of it, because why not? I mean, all they have to do is basically take what they've done, wire it up with explosives, put a bunch of stuff around it, and get actors to cry when it goes down, and they get a scene.
Sounds like a lot of events that happen on TV.
Yeah, because it costs a lot more money to make a whole brand new... I mean, look what they did with friggin... Even in Endgame, they're sitting there, we're sitting inside the Avengers compound. No more Avengers compound. There. That's how the fight starts.
Actually, can I throw in another angle to this? There's a whole there's a theme that runs through all these movies as well. And I think we actually had a convo offline about this, but this idea of going off on this very deep esoteric chat and then immediately being undercut by a joke or cynicism. And this runs rife through all these movies as well. Something really tragic happens, tons of people die, and then somebody makes a quip.
Yeah,
and then
that's
all of a sudden,
me right here, me doing that. I do that.
Well, I think that's part of that's part of habit, though. Like where I grew up on the same movies, I grew up in a family where that was the height of making puns or a quip and then leaving the room. However, that really doesn't help when you're like, imagine Monty said, Monty and Michael Claridge were being quippy with one another. Sapphire would never get done. So there has to be a line.
Oh, yes. There's a time and a place. You're absolutely right. But
cattiness is, I think, an element of our current culture that is pretty toxic. And I love that sort of catty humor as much as anybody, and I play on it immensely. But it definitely has to be turned off. there's some
we go.
places where it's not appropriate.
I mean, look, but Monty doing his interview with Gareth on See the Pattern, right?
Yeah.
He has that excellent aura of like, he's a sticky character to watch. He has that kind of attitude, but he's not being quippy and cynical. You know what I mean? He's being very encouraging and uplifting.
Well, and I think you see that because you see him visually setting it aside to answer the question more sincerely. Like he does that several times. Like,
I mean, it's just inefficient in science and math and honestly
he's
working.
ratcheting up his sincerity as he's trusting the conversation, and he's like, well, normally I would answer it like this, but let me tell you. It's kind of how it came about.
That's actually true because it's, well, just like I think, I'm not sure who it was, one of you gentlemen actually defended me in the comment section of one of the videos because someone thought that I was like, somehow not being fair to, I think it was Ben Davidson or someone, I'm not sure. And I was like, hey, dude, I've been to his conferences. He's my friend, like type of thing. But I don't agree with every single thing every one of my friends say either. You're supposed to be allowed to have disagreements and to rationalize and to talk about these things.
I think maybe it's the framing, right? I'm sorry. Also, the coffee's kicking in, so I'm going 100 miles an hour.
Oh, me too. I'm just pumped.
Being like, hey man, like I love this idea, but maybe if you did it this way. I think it's framed in this idea of you disagree and we're at odds. But if you're, but not in real. You need these odds to create
it's
new
sincerity.
ideas.
That's what I meant about Monty. He began to trust, and it obviously helped that Monty's he knows me. I met him. We've talked. It helps that you can trust him. He's going to give you a rational expose on your work. I mean, this is just being fair, really. And clearly we're able to exist inside two paradigms. I love my Star Trek. I'm kind of sad that I don't get to experience wormhole travel if the electric universe is true, as far as I know. That's something that we have to deal with. We have no more, teleportation could technically happen. You could technically beam someone somewhere. That's possible.
But couldn't we take the wormhole as the hyperboloid hourglass that exists within these torus fields? Like the picture that Buddy was showing last week, you have an hourglass shape, a hyperboloid shape, which is an hourglass, and that hourglass looks like the wormhole depictions in all the Einsteinian Lorentz diagrams. That's what they were really kind of saying. I know we have this idea that you fold over a paper and you put a pen through it and it creates you fold time and space, but that's not really a logical conceit.
Well,
I still can't get Buddy's images out of my mind, by the way. I was captivated.
Why do you think that Buddy and I have been hanging out together this whole time? Because it's like, I was like, no, I might not get what you're saying, but I know that you're not talking out your butt. You have something to say, and these things, I need to be reminded of them, because if I'm not, it's so easy for someone in electronics to just try to work to dampen things. Resonances are noise to me.
Well, you said the word. Certain things resonate. If you're, if you know some things, over time, you get to experience and learn stuff over your existence, and you can start making connections. And then when somebody says something or shows you a piece of work or whatever, if that resonates with you, there's probably a reason why it does. It may in fact be true.
Well, we can't deny that just sitting here in the length of time that from the time I started the Electric View till now, I ended up going, I'm not sure what astrology means, to going, oh, yeah, well, I mean, maybe not the part of what it affects my personal life, so let's leave that alone. But I meant Jupiter does have a strong influence on the sun and our solar system and the solar output, and all of that. So, I mean, and it should when you think about it.
Can anybody confirm this for me or not? But Jupiter is 11.86 year orbit. Is the 11-year solar cycle 11.86 years or what?
I honestly do not know. I do know that we have multiples of these cycles. I do know that they are probably not just ours, because we have to understand that the sun is connected to everything on this chain, and everything on this chain would be receiving the same current at the same time. Really important to note, because that's a series circuit and you have no choice. So all of our resonances, the Earth's, Mercury's, Venus's, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn's, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto's, and all the rest, and the sun, are all making their own music in different frequencies, you know, and they're all together singing. Okay, now
like a choir.
Like a choir. Well, all of those frequencies are carried along because each one of them is a resistance, an inductance, and a capacitance. So they all create an RLC circuit. So each one of those planets and the sun and all that are technically, if we could listen correctly to the noise of this and discern what the sound is of the solar system next on the chain, let's say Sirius, because it's behind us there, so let's imagine that one. Well, then we should, just by listening, be able to discern what planets are there and stuff, like what constituents they're made of, just by their resonance.
Yeah, if you listen to
it's
the
like a radio.
Yeah.
If we could interpret it. I mean, it's just like an electrocephalogram for your brain. I mean, it's not something you just stick an electrode and you knew everything, because I don't know how to do that, and I'm an electrical engineer. But I have some ideas.
Yeah, maybe in a similar way of, you know, the way you can bounce a laser off of a window and listen to people that are talking in behind that window, listen to the conversation. Well, if you knew how to determine, you know, this is what a gas giant sounds like, this is what a supersized gas giant sounds like, this is what a rocky body sounds like when the Birkeland currents go through it, you might be able to determine how many planets are in a solar system without even training a telescope on it.
Well, the thing is, though, we'd have to sort of start building models and discern, like build Jupiter, for example, and all of the moons of Jupiter, and then start taking them off and seeing what changes in the tone. You know what I mean? And start taking a moon away, you know? That type of thing. I know that sounds ridiculous, but you'd have to program it, but it would be no harder than programming a musical instrument.
Let's go a little deeper, take the parallel of the human body and organs, you know, in our human
body. Can I use sound to explode your organs? Yes, Frank Herbert, I can.
Or organs forming these double layers that are basically, if you know, you look at that kind
of. And his name will bring death eternal.
The opening section of you know, the chest and the organs all tightly packed, right? They're tightly packed and they're barely touching, but these are, you know, akin to kind of plasma sheath layers.
Yes.
It's like magnetic organization.
Yes,
but then
very much so.
Then our body resonates in harmony, and sometimes you're sick and an organ doesn't resonate. I think you run the parallel of what we can see here on Earth or experience directly with the parallel through fractal understanding of the universe, and then you can kind of apply the resonances of the human body to the cosmics.
And this takes us all the way back to going, what happens when we're...
was doing.
Oh, go ahead there, buddy.
Sandro did it great. When we brought Sandro on, he was one of our guests, and he might be listening as a viewer right now, I'm not sure, but he put it all together, like from a biological approach on how a cell unfolds to how a heart's connected to the brain, and how systems are very similar like that on cosmological scales as well. He'd be really good to talk to about that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take a look here, and yeah, he started noticing that the way that we grew was very similar in two sides, you know, and we grew like the difference being the neck and the head, or the neck and the head being a mirror of the rest of the body below. And the thing that's interesting, of course, is we mentioned this is in the show, and to back up Buddy's and to all of these claims, is that that's the part that's different when you make hybrids, like for example a Tygon or a Liger. You know, if you're in that area and you're making one of those, well, the difference is male and female, which one's the mother, which one's the father, controls what traits are dominant. And the head neck area is often a separator. Like you could have the head of something else and the body of something else, which is just fascinating. Of course, that is not even going into the mythological aspects of that. But so we have a lot of people talking. Anyone see anything that they want to mention here with these people? Lovely individuals.
I just wanted to say welcome, Centrix B, Shinguki, Dupli, Cat, and
he's probably going
Starlight
to kill you
Spectrum.
for using his name that badly.
I know. I suck at pronunciations sometimes.
Duplicate rivals Shockwave in comments. No, actually, Kronos, Duplicate, and Shockwave are like going for top commenter on EU stuff. I love it. There's not a video I don't go down the comments in and find at least one of them laying it out. I love it.
JRGMTY, welcome. Enjoy the show, folks.
It wasn't because of its weight, by the way, that Jupiter would be affected things. It would be, in my implication, because of its charge. But I don't know for sure. I mean, I've been wrong before, so it would be my first guess for sure. Do we have any questions in there? I didn't know. I was just scrolling through, only I got so far. You see him, Duff? No?
No, I got to see. It's like a lot of chatting, but not many questions.
Okay.
So throw in some questions.
There was one earlier. I'm trying to get to it.
I'm in the chat too. I got a good one, Neil, I guess, for the show.
Sure.
With how it ties all in. Maybe not to, quote unquote, the electric universe, but the morphology of the alien, which plays heavily into the themes.
Okay, yeah.
The way I see it, it comes from primarily the fallen angel stories from the Bible, the jinn from the Quran and Islam, all the way through to later times when you get to.
We're talking about the
sprites.
grays. Or are we talking about what are we talking about here?
How it morphed anyway. You talk about from fallen angels to the jinn, and it morphs all the way through time up to fairies, sprites, elves, leprechauns, into the gray alien, in the ET. Yeah, it like morphed from way back when up until now, and it heavily plays into the.
And don't forget about Sean. Don't forget about the studies done on the brain where you put a certain charge into the brain and you can't move your body. It puts you into like a sleep-like state, but you're wide awake, fully aware. And some people see a witch on their chest. Some people see an alien coming into the room and sitting on their chests, and a lot of it could be tied to that as well.
Right. Weren't we just talking a couple shows ago about when several hundred years ago somebody sees a dust devil and it's like, oh no, a witch did it, or
right,
they're the gods doing these things, and it plays right into the overall theme of what we're talking about. The Sci-Fi Dreamers episode, but it's all relevant. It kind of. Anytime you're looking at a movie, there's somebody that's out there that usually is a bad guy, some type of alien, usually. And it's like, we'll get them, like the Romulans, the Klingons, that all plays into the theme too.
Sure.
But when you trace it backwards, it goes back to where farther we get away from the events, we'll say, of the last ice age, things over time start to get watered down, but the theme is still there. Just back to the balls on the banisters and architecture and art and homes. You know, people still cleave to the theme subconsciously, if you will. It just keeps going
I think
on.
we have a box that we put
talk about
things
that.
in. God and aliens, I think, are that box. That whole, the thing that we don't know, we put it there. Like, how did that vase fall off the table? Well, maybe aliens did it, or maybe a sprite did it, or maybe a leprechaun did it. You know, these stories develop from unknown experiences are real experiences. When we experience something we don't understand, it doesn't just, you know, sort of exist or not exist based on understanding. We create understanding around our experience. And so whenever we don't understand something that we experience, we create a story to explain it. And those stories become our science fantasy, our science fiction, our religion, our ideologies, our philosophies are all informed by the things unseen and unknown, not understood but believed. And so as we believe things, we place them in a box that says, well, this is what I believe about aliens. Well, I experienced this experience. The experience is relevant. But
I have a lot of people who have come to talk to me about that.
The story is fluid. You know, the story changes over time, but the experiences are real. And I think that's, you know, I think that's what Wal Thornhill taught us, was to go back and to look at, like, these experiences were real. The stories that came up around them become less and less true over time, but the seed is always fertile.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, I witnessed a lot of ET videos in the past, and a good portion of them seem to be plasma balls of plasma, balls of light that aren't defined very well.
Well, that actually is true. We've talked about the same thing with the Virgin Mary at Zaytun, Egypt, in Cairo, being on a metal roof, and there could be some electrical phenomenon going on there, because people clearly saw something, and it glowed.
Well, it could be, you know, something blowing in between in the layers of the atmosphere up high as well, moving fast.
Certain. Well, no, not in that particular case, because it lasted for several years. But you're absolutely right on that. I mean, number one, high magnetic fields also affect people's brains and cause them to think that they're being terrorized. They cause intense fear, generally speaking. So if you were near one of these things, looking at high intensity plasma in a ball lightning shape, your brain might not be able to cope with that.
Well, it's generating a magnetic field and affecting your brain.
Yeah, it could possibly be. But there's also
a very light. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, a very lightweight analogy to that is that people are generally affected by storm systems. We have this idea where our moods are affected by weather. It's just that we live in a very lightweight weather pattern, I guess, on Earth. It's not very destructive. I mean, it's destructive, but it's not that destructive.
No.
So people are affected by very small shifts in weather. You can imagine that if you're staring down a plasma filament, like in real life, that might just really change the way you perceive life, and that's all you could really focus on, probably. Like,
or if you're 20 miles away from, if you're 20 miles away from a thunderbolt of the god, you maybe survive, or maybe it just makes you crazy.
I really like that will-o-wisps and sprites were in Nordic culture were destroyed, like I said, by cold iron weapons. You would hit the plasma ball with something that would short it out. I think that's fantastic. You know, and that's how you kill them. I mean, they thought it was something to kill. I thought that's pretty cool. Actually, I had go ahead.
Quick note on jinn. Jinn is an Arabic word for crazy or occult spirit, and it's also another word for ether. You know, so we have a lot of these words.
Daemon is another one too. For Greeks had that, where it was spirits that would come and give advice, which makes perfect sense if you saw something that was lighting up an area. And you were a firm believer that gods existed, even though the gods were not really in the sky as much anymore. But you were still taught those things. It's quite possible that these things would still give you visions, and you would listen to what they said. Because, I mean, today we call them aliens, but I saw an alien spacecraft. But maybe back then we said, no, I saw a friggin' demon or a genie. And it told me to, do some crazy shit with some butter and some herbs, and it would make a really good sauce, base for sauce anyway.
While it's still happening in the chat, people are talking about the exoplanet, or like the TRAPPIST system, and exoplanet
By the way, that's
research.
how a Canadian becomes possessed by a demon. Neil just explained that.
Take away their pancake syrup.
Yeah, the devil made me cook it.
The devil made me cook it. I like that.
What do you guys think about exoplanets, exoplanet research? Why things like the TRAPPIST system are not followed up on, and yeah.
Well, the exoplanets, often they're using. I mean, we get it wrong looking at planets just next door. I mean, we got Venus wrong straight out. We got Mars wrong straight out. We got everything else wrong every time we went there. So I'm thinking that they're wrong, but
they may be, in fact, correct on the big gas giants that are orbiting close into the stars.
Oh, I think they're there.
They can see them cross in front of the. But if the solar system that they're looking at doesn't have the plane crossing through it and the star and the planets going, we just can't tell. We just don't have the technology to look deep in space until we get a 2-mile wide telescope out in space that we can look through.
I think it's disingenuous for scientists to say this idea of Earth-like planets. I know it's, bombast and article writing, but this idea that things are like an Earth, no, maybe, but this idea that saying it over and over and over again has now instilled this idea in pop culture that there are certain planets out there that are just like Earth. They're Earth-like. They're perfect distance from the sun. But that means really nothing. I mean, talk about mass and density and electric charge. Even if it were exactly like Earth, who's to say what's on that planet or where it is in its evolution cycle or any number of things that I think it's actually quite disingenuous. And that's one of those things about exoplanet research that, while very exciting, is also extremely demoralizing, because how much money is being spent and how many telescopes time used to discern spectral analysis of dots moving in front of other dots versus getting us to the moon or getting us to asteroids or any number of things like that.
Still 100%.
Especially when you find out that what they're really doing is trying to mine. That's the real goal. Is they're looking for valuable metals and shit like that.
Well, if they keep talking about it, maybe it'll force them to
go there. That's what's going to happen. The Expanse was right, at least in that sense, that the Mormons will build a ship and go to Proxima Centauri before anyone else. I mean, they want to get away from us. I mean, we think they're weird. They think we're weird. It works out. No,
Proxima Centauri is a star, right? You can't go to a star. Right now in our solar system, we're sending the Parker Solar Probe, and we can barely get near the sun, right? Within 10 million miles or something.
Well, apparently there are 3 planets inside the green zone of Proxima Centauri, so that's why they're talking about it.
I just mean, let's get a base on the moon. I mean, I sound like a broken record, but get a base on the moon first, or comet, or
something. It'll be a lot easier to launch something from there.
Yeah, this idea that somehow we're going to bypass the moon base and then bypass the Mars base and somehow get an Earth-like planet and exoplanet system just seems really strange and just way too far ahead. It's like somebody's like, oh, I want to be a blah, blah, I don't know, just getting into a field and just buying,
didn't you know warp drive is...
You're not an astronomer. You have to do the work.
Yeah, but didn't you know warp drive is only 10 years away?
Yeah, and we're all going to be underwater in 2010.
Okay. I don't know what to say to that, but all I can say is we tend to be here year after year, and what happens is the stories get more and more insane. Speaking of gin, but really, people need to ask for what they want.
Speaking
is my
of
suggestion.
Gin,
if you're an informed public, if we're an informed public or an informed group of people, you go to these people and say, why are you studying exoplanet research? How much money is going into gravitational waves? This money would be way better placed in these other programs. And it's not to say that the government agencies can't make profit still, but this idea that somehow you just, again, buy a guitar, you're not a guitarist. you have a guitar, you might look like one, but you can't play. Or, so there's this idea that science or NASA can't get to the moon or low Earth orbit, but somehow we have a Mars and an exoplanet, or SETI even. Like SETI is exciting if you believe in aliens, but if you know that aliens don't really exist in the way that we think, then what is all the money going into SETI?
Maybe if they keep talking about it, it'll force the people will go say, oh, stop talking about it and let's go already.
I was saying that when I was 5. I was like, my dad was talking.
China seems to have gotten that memo.
Well, we'll say, but okay. So here's another question. Let's say China's on the far side of the moon right now, and they have these rovers. What's the technological disparity between America and China? Like, you think why can't Americans really can't even get can't get into low Earth orbit without Russian support or Elon Musk? Like, but why is there an active extra solar system program when we can't do these very basic things? I mean, I'm just coming at it from a business and art perspective. You got to learn how to sketch before you can make a really big piece.
President Trump and Space
building
Force,
and navigation
that's going
are
to change
different.
all that.
Yeah, I'm sure. But the idea that something could be going to you want to navigate before you can. I mean, we're simply not capable. I mean, even mentally, we're not capable of going outside of this solar system, I don't think, because we're not technically, someone had asked, what's going to happen to our bodies if we grow up on different planets? Like they were talking about the expanse, and if you grow on, they weren't talking about, but the implication is, if you grow up in Ceres, would you have the same amount of mass and all that kind of thing? But it's not entirely plausible then that we would be even the same creatures if we need the electric field to impinge upon ourselves to make us into human beings. I mean, if you know what I mean, what would a rose look like on Mars? Would it be a rose? Would it have even the same characteristics as a rose?
I don't even think we know what a human would look like if they were outside of their spaceship or spacesuit in space.
Meant been born there.
No, I just mean what is space? How does space affect human physiology or our density and where we exist in the current solar system?
I don't even know.
True, right.
If we grow a second head or a fourth head, I mean, because we're really fractal recursive I mean, somebody's made a great comment in the chat about how snowflakes are basically the same thing, but they all look really, really different. So the fundamental rule set is there.
Snowflakes are just people too. You mean the physical?
Cultural relevance aside.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he meant actual ones that fall.
I got it.
Actually, beautiful snowflakes who don't have opinions about politics. But yeah, snowflakes are using rule sets.
Right.
Like a path of least resistance, charge density, their position in space to create patterns, right, that we can recognize. And then we look at one snowflake against the next, and you can see all these similarities, but all these different disparities as well. So, yeah, maybe there are humans on Earth-like planets, but they're definitely not like us, exactly like us. It just that stretch, that's a little one step too far, I guess.
Do you think they have?
See, I don't think we're like
snowflakes?
us. Though. I think we change too. I mean, if you look at any animal, any living being that survives in its own ecosystem, adapts to that ecosystem over time, and even the over time part is in question, so that we can actually adapt quite more. I mean, if our physiology is changed by space, in that matter is changed by space and time, and those and space and time are fluid, then what is the constant? Is the constant consciousness? Is that the actual foundation of the universe? Is consciousness? I mean, that's my crazy hippie aunt's been telling me that shit for years. I mean, what is the foundation? If everything is fluid and everything is reacting to everything and everything is in motion and everything is changing, then I think then the more relevant question is what is staying the same, because literally everything is always in a state of change.
Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
And I mean, then it comes down to geometry, right? Like change is occurring within the state of resonance. So matter and life is forming from these foundational ideas, which aren't ideas consciousness. Like, I don't know, it starts to get fuzzy, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Bruce Lipton was very clear on the conference that I went to, that the cell was reacting to outside signals from the space to the environment, and we were just reacting to them. So if you go to Mars, you're going to become a Martian.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, I mean, that's probably much more than what Sir Fred Hoyle would say, but in his panspermia theory. But we can't discount that things like bacteria and viruses could travel between planets easily enough, but there's no reason to think that if even octopuses or spiders, or as we were saying before, come from Mars or something crazy like that, that they look like that when they were on Mars. You know what I mean? Like the first generation born here would look different, you know?
Exactly. The ones that survive would continue to change and adapt quite promptly over a few generations. And if in fact would a person who lived, would a colony or a tribe of human beings that lived on the Earth when the Earth gravity and the Earth atmosphere were much, much different during the golden age, or whatever, the red dawn, or whatever you scientist types like to call it, wouldn't those people seem like aliens to us today, even though they were born and raised here right on Earth?
Well, we see the cone heads, and they did have bigger skulls, and I don't just mean because they bound them. They were physically larger,
they had a different,
and larger eyes and everything.
Seam.
Yeah, everything.
The seams of their skulls were different. They had a different seaming process.
Most definitely.
When we're babies, we have a hole in the back of our head, and as we grow up, that hole grows together. That bone knits.
It's on the top of the head, yeah. But
the knitting of the bones is actually different in the people they found in South America. They literally have a different, a skull shape design.
Also, because of the skull elongation, they have a blood supply hole in the back of their skull where we don't have that, because our blood supply is enough to supply the whole scalp. They had to have that extra little hole and many other features. The point where their head attaches to the skull is in a slightly different place on their skulls because of the geometry. They were not completely different from us, but they were different.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
So it's completely within the realm of possibility that humanoids born and raised, throughout the millennia right here on planet Earth, could appear to us as complete aliens. And if they existed in a different time and survived that time and came back to Earth later, or lived under the Earth or whatever, I mean, the point is that an alien is just something that's not known to us, or is vast, or is different than us.
Thanks for defining the word, genius.
Right? No, but
thanks for saying it, not making me say it.
Duff, from my understanding,
sciencey, so I'm sorry.
No, that's sorry. It's just cool. It's just cool.
Sorry, Duff.
Basically my point is that there's an alien under every rock. The aliens can come from outer space. Aliens could come from, like Jules Verne said, from within the Earth. Aliens could come from other, anything that's very, aliens come across the Mexican border. Apparently, there's these. Sorry to get political, but these are aliens. We call them aliens. So this idea of the other.
Oh, I'm an alien when I go down there. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a fucking alien too.
The others in Lost. I mean, this is actually a great segue into the show topic, which is sci-fi versus real-fi.
Ooh, yes.
Well, I think
like Fringe would be,
I think that
I want to interject and make a quick point also, too,
actually,
if I could, for 1 second.
Yeah.
So then, everything you guys just said, then DNA is a decoder based on its environment. It decodes the environment around it through itself.
Great thought.
So
Right,
it's like
that's what I believe.
four gestation periods. It looks like from the fossil record. If you change the electrical environment, DNA responds to it.
Well, yes,
That's why we
that
have
was our
works that
debate.
way,
Yeah,
man. Real simple
And I was
process.
gonna mention that
the Ebner
these
effect, I think
changes
it's
over
called.
time
That's it.
affected these long-skulled people, and the interbreeding with the human race as well. The ability for them to interbreed
And I thought I was into interbreeding.
was limited. I think they're the Rh negative peoples of the Earth now, and over time they changed because they were interbreeding. Their elongated skulls disappeared because they didn't have a large base of genetics to breed with in the beginning. So they did breed with themselves at first, and then over time they probably started running into diseases like we see in the kings and queens, where they were interbreeding for over 1,000 years, trying to keep the money in the family.
Yes, the Habsburg jaw. But if I could, argue with you, I agree with you on premise, but the whole Rh negative thing, we know that there was a species that was Rh negative. Why? Because there's Rh positive. Now, hear me out. You had to be Rh negative, then you had to get the Rh positive factor by having somehow had monkey rhesus factor introduced in your blood. So there could be another species which you melded with there. Then
Right,
there's
and
the
that
A
species-
factor. Well, hold on. Then there's the A factor and B factor. That would mean that there's likely two other species that we also merged with. So that would make us a triple species or quadruple species.
Denisovan and Cro-Magnon,
Which
were
is probably why it's really
involved,
hard
yeah.
for us to have birth.
But what I'm saying is, it's hard for RH
And our
negative
babies
and
are
RH
just
positives
completely
to have
defenseless
birth.
idiots.
That's for darn sure. They actually attack the cells if the RH blood factor is opposite from what. But you see,
Yeah, that's
may
only
not
been
be- it
solved
may not-
recently, yes.
it may not have been a people that were on the earth that were Rh negative. Possibly those are the fallen angels that came down, and red-headed, elongated skull people that when they interbreeded
You have
with.
been watching too many vril conspiracies by some weird German scientist or something.
No, this is ancient historical. This is ancient historical records, man.
Well, yes, but Sean, I was on the Sean show there when I first met Sean, and I'll let you talk, of course, Sean. But Sean, when he put forth this thing, the talk that they were having was the exact same talk that you're proposing, but from a black supremacy point of view. And I don't mean in a non-valid.
I'm not talking about.
No. Please understand that it's not a supremacy thing. It's just the idea that, and there were likely anybody who went up north close to these things. We'd be pale. It's only sun that made us get dark. Trying to not die. Exactly.
Is a proven science.
Radiation, yeah. So it's just our location and latitude and all that. So, but yes, those would be those people who were more, I guess, holy and wise that came from the north would definitely have a leg up. But it doesn't change that.
But if these people came from Mars, which were the Rh negative population that mixed with the human population, is where I was getting at. I wasn't getting at. I was saying that this Rh negative gene that is in the human population now may have come from a planet that was closer to Saturn.
Oh, okay.
With a different charge is what I'm saying.
No,
you didn't let me finish.
No, I think that the pollutants might have during devastations we might have tried interbreeding to save ourselves, and that could have happened. That's something that's come up during cataclysms. But Sean, I wanted you to have an opportunity because
it's the blood antigens is really all the negatives and positives really mean anyway. There's just blood antigens and. You can.
No, it's actually the lack of the rhesus monkey gene.
Well,
they say
anyway,
that.
let's not
I
worry
mean,
about this. Let's
yeah,
just
they
get to
say
the
that,
point.
but they're still antigens. They're blood antigens. The same way a lot of black people who are O positive, and there are black people that are O negative too. My grandfather's O negative, but sickle cell anemia is adapting to malaria, which is freaking crazy. You know what I'm saying? So it's literally us adapting to the environment. So the whole interbreeding idea, it looks like it works backwards. That the Cro-Magnon had children that were other than what they were. Same with Neanderthal. There's no trace of Neanderthal in Africa at all. It just jumps.
No, and
Like,
I
whoa.
hypothesize
Like,
that
whoa.
the electric charge changed us
Jumps.
all.
What?
Yeah.
And then we wouldn't have had to walk around and interbreed at all. This is what it ends up being from the fossil.
Well, actually, that wouldn't
From the change in
that
electrical
could
environment.
that could be a potentially possible thing.
Differing charges
Imagining that
equals
the
different
mammoth
races,
and
sorry.
mastodon, shut up.
Back.
The mastodon and mammoth just disappeared. They just the new generation were just elephants. I can see that. Now it's not that I totally buy that, and I wanted to be clear, Rick, that I wasn't saying that anything about the supremacy thing. What I meant was that a lot of those things that you're discussing come from this there's a Vril society type of sort of conspiracy line that tries to engender people, and that's something that happens in all cultures, by the way, trying to make people feel special. Like people, you need to look a little further than people's trying to say, do you have alien DNA? Pay us $25 and we'll tell.
Yeah, I don't think that way. I don't.
No, obviously not.
My mom
You wouldn't
wanted
be
me
here
to
then.
marry a black woman and have a brown baby, and she wanted the whole world to be brown. I mean, I
It's
can
impossible
dig that.
because we live in different latitudes. But yes,
I know,
nice sentiment.
but what I'm saying, the difference, some of the differences in the antigens in the blood groups, either being positive or negative, they may in fact be after the fact of the main transfer, when these lightning bolts came down and created different races because of the fact that
They were fried?
They fried Cro-Magnon, which was over here at a different level or a different power level or frequency than the ones over here.
Clearly, you would have to be
that
correct.
race over there or this race over here.
If you think about it, you'd have to be correct anyway, because dolmens and those little small things, little places to hide yourselves in these caves and stuff, that's one thing. But some of these places in Turkey, Cappadocia, and other places around the world could store 20, 30, 50,000 people. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and the sheep and the cows and everything else.
Well, yeah, so you're talking about the ability to hide for a long period of time. You don't just, that's like a solar flare outburst of, lasting months, maybe. Not so.
Well, yeah, that's paranoia that it was coming back, and it was coming
it paranoia
back maybe
or
like
was
every
it
20
last
or 50
time it
years
messed
or
us
whatever,
up
right?
so bad we had to hide? Like
And I think James can answer that question because he's got all the timelines written down, and it seemed like they were, what was it, James, 15, 20-year intervals at some of these planets?
Well,
Jay's not there. Yeah, I know.
Oh, he's not here. Sorry.
Well, he might be here, but he's not.
Sorry. The timeline for T cycles began at 30 years and it went to 30 and 1/6 year. T cycles 31 and a quarter plus 1/32.
Yeah, that reminds me of Mars's oscillation. Maybe every 30 years, Mars would go away and then come back every 30 years, kind of thing.
Well, it's in the modern or in the last 54 centuries, it definitely wasn't the planets. It was some other body.
Or some other electrical force, possibly.
Yeah, it's debatable about what the object would be. The interesting thing about, the psychological interesting thing about conspiracies is they think that if we just accepted the truth, that it would solve all problems. And it's like, if I've seen UFOs and I've seen that, I believe them to be, I believe that there actually have been aliens. I've seen craft that did things that nature cannot do. So,
Right. Well,
I
Tesla
accept.
invented that stuff.
Let James
James.
finish though.
Well, I'm just saying that I accept that aliens are real and they're from other planets. Okay, that doesn't solve any of my problems or anybody else's.
No.
Exactly.
We don't really know if even if aliens did arrive here, they are part of us now. We don't really know. We know so much now from the electric universe point of view that we know that our history is so fundamentally flawed that we literally should laugh at our own attempts to decode it.
Well, we need a new book.
Well, that's the whole point. We're trying to build write one.
Can I just jump in on a kind of bring this back to the main topic of the show?
Well, I was about to say we have some people. So yes, go ahead.
Cool. No, I was just going to say this idea, and it was really tangential to the bloodline stuff. It has nothing to do with that. It's more about why you're looking at Expanse clips and all these things. Why do people find sci-fi way more compelling and to watch than actual science footage? Like what is, and I'm talking about specifics like glowing particle, like this shot right here.
Mm-hmm.
The blue glow and the shot setup is framed in a way that's way more compelling than your average real science show, or forget the media, but real science on YouTube that people like astronomers, like I get no views. This gets millions and millions. I'm not this particular clip, but you know what I mean? You show the actual stuff, but people really want to see glows, plasma blasts, people dying, people, they want to see human interaction.
This image may be a genetic memory of Venus and its glow in its tail.
That's what, when you were talking, this is what I was seeing right here. This is it. The old intro to BSG.
Yeah, the only thing I'm saying is that we have this right now, for real. If you spend 2-3 hours at night with a proper telescope stacking images, you'll get this real thing. This is done with a particle simulation library in Maya.
This is probably just done with
this is 78, right?
This is 78. They're just throwing flour, paint through a screen or something. That's all they're doing. But, But
generally speaking, like you go, let's say Black Panther and Avatar, these movies, the amount of money that's thrown into them, made from them, and then the continuation of that money could get us to the moon, could get us all giant telescopes. I mean, real world stuff that's way more exciting than vibranium or unobtainium. It's almost idiotic. It's not just stupid. It's like, it's insulting to children, the level of intelligence that these movies.
But I love the Avengers.
Yeah, no one's like, look, these stories are very compelling to watch. There's no denying.
Are you sure? Because I'm watching right now the most worst one ever. I mean, look at this. This is 1981 Battlestar Galactica. It's just terrible. I mean, look at the Egyptian headdresses they're wearing for helmets too. I love that.
Space motorcycles.
Did you ever watch the original? Because there's a lot of little Egyptian things in there too.
I watched it every week when it was brand new.
I think the negativity of this is that what I'm trying to say is that like this Egyptian cosmology, like the Jet Pillar and things besides the 3 pyramids, I'm talking about like Ptah and the original other parts of Egypt that really understood magnetic technology and plasma technology, is never talked about, simply I think because it's overtaken by all these giant movie franchises, TV franchises that repurpose this information. And now if you search for things like ancient Egyptian cosmology, you're going to get stories that are reinterpreted, I don't want to say poorly, but in different ways that really don't reference what we're talking about here. So I really am trying to bring it back to like, how do you integrate plasma cosmology as a real thing in our current paradigm where people are just really don't want to look at the real thing. They want to look at the souped up, particleized, glowy blaster version of things versus like a really steady shot of a nebula today.
Have you guys ever seen Uncharted X on YouTube?
Great question too.
He does a lot of pyramid and ancient Egypt stuff. Just as a thought experiment, one of the things they're finding in Egypt is the foundations under the pyramids are built with giant tiles.
Yeah,
that are and they're the lowest foundations underneath everything else. Is the biggest rocks, the most monolithic stones are laid on the foundations of the whole area. So by the same token, then you have all these other monuments that are built on top of these foundations. And they're multiple epochs, multiple cultures, multiple times, multiple eras. You know, the whole entire exterior of the pyramids has been stripped down to build other things. So literally what we're looking at is in Egypt is multiple expressions of cultures over time. What remains is amazing, but there's also these other stories that have happened along the way. We say the same thing in our DNA, and that's the correlation I want to make, is between our bodies, our expression as humanity on this earth, and our DNA itself is actually the same as ancient Egypt. There are these foundations, and then there's all the stuff that's happened and changed. And when we read our DNA and we look at our history, I think we have to see ourselves in our current derivations the same way we look at the ancient pyramids, that we have been affected by, and we have affected ourselves. We have had external influences on us. We've had earthly influences. We've had catastrophic influences. We've survived it all, just like the pyramids. We are the perfect corollary to the periods in that we still retain that foundational DNA that's carried us through in every different experience that we've been through throughout the epochs. So I just want to make that connection between the pyramids and really just me. I'm like a pyramid.
Like we have cockroaches, we are the cockroaches to the earth. And the oldest stuff on the earth is the biggest and the most complex. I don't know if you're aware of this stuff, but have you seen the megaliths in Russia? They're massive, by far than Baalbek. They're just absolutely ridiculously massive. There's like stones in Baalbek.
That's another topic, though. As much as I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
maybe it could be like, who has the biggest rock? That could be
the Russians.
That'd be fun.
The Russians just drop rock all over the place and just say, "Look at my rock." What? That wasn't swearing. Okay, so they lost his wife with EU references. Yes, 108. In fact, when the code went down, did you notice that it turned into like a cartouche with all the addition symbols when the 108 counted down? I always thought that was totally messed up. On Lost, I don't know if anyone noticed that. No, I'm the only one. Okay.
I wasn't a big fan of Lost, so.
Yeah, I saw Lost. Yeah, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's Lost.
And I'm going to go back.
I watched Lost and then I blocked
Chris's
it out.
Chris's question.
I watched Lost and then I got therapy.
Wasn't his question? How do we get people that are so into the sci-fi, then, if you will, to just take a little look over at the reality side?
That's what this whole show is about, man.
And you know, when and I, use this paper, and it's Dr. Bratt's 2 papers. If we're having a discussion, and people watch Ancient Aliens, they've seen all this stuff, they have their beliefs, and they have this and that, and they love science fiction and Pokemon and whatever else. Well, look at this right here. We just don't like the reality of the consequences of what might be on the other side, but we don't really understand it. It's not going to hurt you, and it's not going to shatter your world, so to speak. It should be giving people some clarity. I mean, that's what the main topic. Well, what I would like to present on the other show I was on, was talking about last year. I was just going to present the Dr. Bratt papers. Everybody, shut up for a second and check this out. They don't want that. That's a really strong pill. I call it a hard, strong pill to swallow.
Yeah.
We just don't want it. We just don't want that whole reality check, because it would. For me, dominoes fell. But for some people, they're afraid of challenging their beliefs, if you will. They just want to confirm them and stay in that comfort zone lane of the possibility of something being possible. There's a possibility of aliens. We don't know. Why are they putting so much money into SETI and things of that nature? Why would they do it if there's no such thing? And it gets into that whole conspiratorial type of mindset, rather than let's get some clarity on some things and start to figure some things out broadly. You know how we do broadly.
One of the symbols that we work with is the double pillars, and I think that has a real corollary in how we think. And I've worked with a lot of people with disabilities in geriatric, people with Alzheimer's and dementia. One of the things that I really understand as someone who's with it or is conscious is someone who can hold two ideas in their head at once. If you have an agenda and a perspective, if your mind is set that this is what's true and this is what's real and this is number one, then you're not thinking on that dual track with those two pillars. People who I've spoken to, and I kind of bums on the street, the CEO of a mid-sized corporation, are able to consider two ideas at once. And if you have the capacity to consider two things in your own head, then you're working a current, right? Am I wrong here, electrical people? So, but if you just got the one, if you just got the one direction, if you just got the one thing you're proposing or the one idea in your head, that's not a two-way current. That's not there. You can't. It doesn't work the same. And so, people who are intelligent in science fiction, in science fantasy, and in science fact, people who understand things and who are really pushing forward the envelope in the right direction are people who can put two things in their head and consider two things at once. Yes, I am the wizard. Also, I'm a little man behind a screen. Both things are true. And you know what I'm saying? And we have to be in a position to consider two possibilities and consider two outcomes and consider two.
Well, I consider myself trying to still, it's hard. It's very hard to continue to hold on to the old paradigm, but I still do.
It is.
I mean, science fiction keeps me there.
I've talked about so many times.
Oh, yes.
It's that idea of separating out the two and understanding ultimately that the bathwater is, and what you throw out, what you reject is just as important as what you accept and what you believe. Those two ideas don't exist without each other. And so it's that duality of consciousness that I think will propel us forward. And if we move forward into a single consciousness, into a single ideology or a single way forward, then I think we're headed in a really dangerous direction. But I think one of the most important things that a show like this does is show you can have science fact and science fantasy in your head at the same time and be okay. It's like Wall says, it's going to be okay. It's not going to hurt you,
David, David. David Talbot says that.
Yes, exactly. You're right.
But yes, Michael, I just want to make a point, though. The whole idea of give and take, right? What I was trying to say actually is really, if people understand the little parts of it that make it exciting versus unexciting, there's this idea when you listen to, I think what I really want to say was it's patience. You have to take your time and incorporate real science. It's not an easy thing. It's like picking up an instrument or reading a book. It takes some time. There's this idea in culture that it's just a money-making tactic. It's the instant gratification mindset. And every science channel, I mean, those big science channels on YouTube take that as this kind of metric of success. So if we can give a 2-minute physics and we can shout at people and make weird thumbnails, then we're doing it right because we're enticing people. But in fact, people have gotten accustomed to taking these tiny snapshots of information with zero context.
Well, that's
versus
called,
like hearsay.
That's concision. That's what it's called. Concision. Being concise or trying to be that way to as much information as possible in a small period of time. And that's usually fine for people who are who are just trying to give you the basics. And I mean, people who who are not trying to go very deep. But it also works in another way. I mean, look what Gareth has managed to pull off. And space news itself, really. I shouldn't.
Well, my thought is that it goes around. What happens is like you learn how to play an instrument and then it becomes easy or so-called second nature.
Right.
But this idea on science programs that people don't follow up, the people who present these shows are so confident in their assertions that the public just says, oh, these guys must have done the research, therefore I can just eat it. And this is what happens with shows where I think the Electric Universe is way simpler. 100,000 times more simple than ad hoc, black, dark, cold, dark matter, and trillions and trillions, and just this whole idea of the purple prose of our contemporary pop sci is just garbage compared to the simplicity of the Electric Universe. However, getting there takes actual patience, and practice. He finally said it. Was it Donald Scott who said it? Somebody brought it up, and I was like, that is the perfect way of explaining people like Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, these people with just vague allusions to concepts without ever saying anything real, because if you keep the public confused, then you can sell to them. If you actually give them an answer like, no, everything's interconnected through electricity and it looks the same at every magnitude, then you can move on and actually do other things. Why would you ever want your customer to move on from your shop? So this is what it is. It's about money making versus moving science forward.
Not necessarily into that. If I was, I'm not. I find that to be, well, I understand that people need to make a living, but science is not conducive to that. I mean, you get patrons, and patrons want you to change your area of focus. If those patrons are not similarly minded, which is the case in the Thunderbolts, are very lucky to have some patrons that are very similarly minded. So, but I can see others who are like, no, I love everything you're doing, but could you sell this dishwasher? You know, like, and you don't even realize it. Some of these guys are so smooth. I'm watching a video and they're talking about something. He goes, speaking of blah, 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 if you need to blah, blah, blah and deal with aliens coming to your world, you need a good web page. And a good web page. And I was like, what? Huh? What? Wait, no, fuck. Oh, you bastard. You got me in an ad. I'm just good. Because, you know, I have ad blockers on everything. So
okay, look at Vsauce, right? Vsauce, 2-Minute Physics, PBS, any of these get a million views on their videos. They do not mention Velikovsky. They do not mention Halton.
Why would they?
But that's idiotic to me. I mean, we could say like, oh, these are figures that were just disproven or whatever. But honestly, it's idiotic, and those channels are harmful. Desperately harmful to science, and people don't want to say that. I know I'm having this as my own opinion about things, but really people like Joe Rogan, Vsauce are highly aware of Thunderbolts Project, highly aware of what's going on YouTube. The circles are tiny.
Really?
If you really get down to it, the circles are tiny. As a comment reader, you go around these circles, you see it's the same people. From Flat Earth to Electric Universe to Joe Rogan, they're all talking to each other, and no one is saying the obvious thing, that the big channels do never mention what could move science forward, which is Tesla already figured out a bunch of stuff.
Yes.
Henri Poincaré is Einstein's original conceit. Telescopes can already see half a dozen things that show in sci-fi. We've already, we can go to the moon if we didn't spend all this money on movies and going to Mars and SETI and shit like that. Like, there's obvious stuff that no one wants to say, but Chris, I'm going to say it.
I think that's great, Chris. And what the other piece of this is that, these are the storytellers. These names that you're dropping these are our storytellers. And we're, if we're talking about science fiction and science fantasy, these are stories. I have to be honest, and I agree with every word you're saying. And yet, as a consumer of these products, I have to tell you that these are my gateways to you. And I think as we continue to be critics of the mechanisms and the fallacies and the watered down science and all the stuff that you're bringing, you're absolutely right. And yet I can't get over this idea that I might not have, my curiosity about the electric universe might have been sparked in some part by Vsauce. Everybody's coming to us from a different place. And I watch the Facebook pages and I see these young guys or old guys who are coming on the pages and like, that's baloney, and nothing could be further from the truth, and that's ignorant. Let me tell you what I think.
Oh my God, I have a bunch of those I could just go through.
And the thing is that it's not conducive to people coming on the channel going, yeah, but what about black holes? People have to be willing to come on and in a chat and say, yeah, but what about this or the other thing that's a fallacy that we no longer believe in, and we either need to be able to teach. Yes. Or we need to learn.
Yes.
Period.
That is, I don't mind teaching people, especially.
The critique of the person of ignorance is annoying as hell, because at the end of the day, we are all a bunch of fringy ass people. We're not mainstream. And just because we have the Facebook page that says this is what we talk about, we have to be willing to let people in who are ignorant and educate them. or send them on their way. And if you're not there to teach or learn, you should leave, because people that are there to complain about how everybody else is stupid and they know everything. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to allow my movement to be taken over by that kind of toxicity. And so I think that YouTube is a medium, and you're learning how to navigate it, and I am watching you learn and learning myself. But I'm not going to put up with the bullies.
No, I mean, I don't think these guys are bad people either. I don't think whoever he is from Vsauce is like a bad person, but I do think a video that gets 1 billion views can change minds more readily than something that gets 1,000 views. Now
it's kind of like you want him to evolve. Don't you just sort of want to talk to him and say, yeah, but also you can now teach this other new stuff. Like,
but it's the measure. I'm saying
that
popularity
these guys know about Electric Universe, and can you think specifically these guys are?
Yes,
are
I do.
Unwilling.
I know it's really unpopular to say that, but
for me,
but I really think that somebody who does the research for Joe Rogan, how could you not stumble across symbols of an alien sky at this point? Okay. I got to you guys organically. Like, I found the electric view of my own accord. No one showed it to me. I just
but you're special, though. You have to.
You are special.
Here, let me say.
You are.
Let me say something, guys. So Joe Rogan has talked about it plenty of times. He's actually made fun of it, and he's talked about Graham Hancock and Graham Hancock touching base on it as well. And Michael Stevens, I've met him in person when he was on tour. He is the most watched person on YouTube for a reason, because he's very informative. His show is amazing. Vsauce 1, Vsauce 2, 3, whatever. That's who Michael Stevens is.
Can we go into that, though? Because I know it's really unpopular to say that it's not that for me, but it's really not that. Those videos are so, like, check out this very interesting correlating parallel to something really interesting. They never actually talk about the really interesting thing. It's always an anecdotal reference to something interesting. It's like Neil Armstrong talking about when one goes to the moon. Did you go to the moon, Neil? When one goes to the moon, blah, blah, blah. It's this creating like this separation of one. Anyway, that's just my opinion. The point is, they've done it. They're super popular and they're super rich. Can we get the real science finally?
Yeah.
He refuses to commit. He presents and moves on. It's a highly non-committal style, and you're right. It's a really good observation.
I have. I think I need to say that we really need to show them for what they are. If you believe in atoms and the models, the values of that, the mass is hard, and all of the labs show that you go down deeper, you found more emptiness, nothing hard. If you believe in that, then you believe that consciousness is not possible. There are consciousness deniers, and we have to name them for what they are and make them unpopular for that.
There are people that are like that, but I think that's kind of a blanket statement as far as to say all these people are.
No, I'm not
Michael
talking
Stevens,
about who those people are. I'm saying those models value those values. If you're a consciousness denier, I mean, you might not be a consciousness denier on the outside, but on the inside, if you hold to that model's values, you're a consciousness denier because of what you support.
Well, if you think about things and how they've unfolded from the atomistic type of view, and how we've come from the atomistic type of view, was a lot of the quantum thinkers and a lot of the David Bohm, Alan Aspect, a lot of these people who had a view that was had Eastern influence to it, and they believed in something called the absolute, which was kind of like God in a way. But this broke our minds away from being part of this broke our minds away from being stuck on an atomistic model into a consciousness type of model, where we started to look at things like consciousness. Walter Russell was also helpful in this movement, and I can't shout enough out to Walter Russell for bringing IBM up from the ground, from starting IBM from the ground up and working and training everybody for 20 years straight. And, because IBM is a giant company, and IBM is most likely going to be, well, I'm not going to hypothesize or anything, but they're at the very top. And this all comes down to computing and geometry. And there's people like Michio Kaku who come out, and they're called America's secret weapon by Neil deGrasse Tyson and all these other people, because he comes out, what, about 15 years ago, and starts talking about graphene. Graphene is going to be. Okay, now what happened to every single college? Almost every single big institution or college has a graphene department now. And where's all the promises? Where's all the promises of these technologies of graphene? Sure, there's going to be a breakthrough eventually, right? But and we're not going to have these space elevators, because we've talked about the logistics of that not being possible, and we've also seen it on shows like Vsauce that shows that it can't be possible. He actually exposed that for not being how high can we build, I think was the title of that episode. But there's a lot to be learned.
Like a space elevator type of thing?
Yeah, a space elevator.
So
there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of money to be made off of this stuff. Like you were saying, Chris, they mentioned a little bit, but not all of it. Sure, the little bit guides us in the right direction, especially if you look at Michael Stevens or Vsauce's episodes about mathematical things. They're talking about them for a reason. Like if you pay attention, people will start talking about Hopf vibrations and what a Hopf vibration is, and a universe made of Hopf vibrations is the electric universe, and it's all made of toruses. And
sure,
people. The entire thing has been put together by a gentleman named Vladimir Ginsburg, using helices and toroids as his fundamental models, and he builds the entire universe and puts all the numbers together in a book that was released last year. And
okay.
Is it electric? It's still electric, yes, but it's geometric. It breaks down to geometric and these magnitudes. And these magnitudes are where ideas shift and where new creatures could possibly come from one solar system to another. What if there's an open window from one galaxy to another where you can only come in right after a large catastrophe, because there's that open window after the bow shock and you can fly in on it or something? And that's what speciation is every time. I don't know.
Look, I'm with you, buddy. I think I'm not trying to insult these guys. I think they're all very brilliant. I think Michael's brilliant. I just want to say that there is an MO in business to make business happen instead of science happen. That's all I'm saying. And business, if you keep people guessing and keep people confused, it's way easier to sell to them. If you give them a car or a battery that doesn't break down, they won't come back to you. But you give them a car and a battery that runs out, they'll come back to you. That's the principle that I'm talking about. So Vsauce and Joe Rogan, all these cats, if you watch the presentation of their videos, just objectively removing all the content, they're magicians. It's all about the way they pop up and the way they present and the thumbnails. It's about it's a circus act.
Actually,
look at Walt
right.
Thornhill, look at David Talbot, look at Halton Arp from the 80s. These guys were not bullshitting. They had no time to bullshit and no time to make faces and stupid thumbnails. They just got on there and they explained very complicated stuff for an hour and moved on and expected you to do the rest of the research. This idea, here, I've been watching Neil scroll through, but Kurzgast and the other guy from PBS with 1 million views about let's fill this blah 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 and show how Einstein was right again is exhausting. I'm sorry, I'm passionate about it because it's exhausting. How many years can we reprove that math works? Okay, math works. Where's our lunar base? Where's access to big telescopes? Where is oil dependency done? Where is connecting people through consciousness? Where is finally saying, Einstein was right to a point, but this is the next version of that. For some reason, we can't evolve science, but everything else can keep moving. Cars, phones, food, not science.
That's because the business wants the the model that they have, because if the Earth is, nothing's conscious, everything's dead, nothing that they do to the Earth, polluted or anything that they do matters at all. And why should they have to pay for the cost for cleaning up with their stuff? Everything's dead, nothing matters at all. It's a death cult.
Crazy.
So what do we think about?
Yeah,
I have a
please go
question
ahead.
for you guys. What do you think about science fiction's ability to prophesy or predict?
Well, that's basically what we're talking about. Yeah.
Can we look to the future for answers, and can we create science fiction that provides answers? Is science fiction the way to solve the problems that you just outlined, Chris? Is it how would that look?
I think
what about
I'll finish and I'll shut up after this. Look at my show. My show is real. I know I always go back to my show. It's not about bragging. It's about real space footage, dope music, and not beating people over the head with old paradigms. That's the only way I can really see it happen. Show real science. Let people, let it be a dialogue, what we're doing here, and engage an audience with it. This idea that Michael somehow or Joe Rogan is the be-all, end-all of information for me is quite depressing, actually. These guys are not my idols. These guys are not people I want to be like at all.
If we could shift gears and talk about Netflix and Hulu and the people who are actually putting millions and billions of dollars into the industry on top of the movies, instead of these people, okay, we talked about science for quite a bit, but what we're talking about science fiction becoming reality. Now, if we look at a style comes and goes through mostly famous people. Famous people will wear something or do something different on one of the coasts in the United States, at least. This is kind of how it works.
Why do we tolerate these famous people?
And so it will perpetuate. It will be a meme. Now you take that and people will do what's happening there. You look at all of these shows, and the majority of them are all showing it's blatantly satanic. I mean, literally. If we're talking about science fiction becoming reality, this is like, if nobody believes in the devil here.
Define for us satanic. When you say satanic, what do you mean?
Oh, dude, I'll open this up. Now,
okay.
Let's not believe in the devil. Let's not believe in the devil and say the devil is science fiction. Okay, if it is, then it's really popular right now. And what's going on is you see TV shows and Netflix and Sabrina and constantly the music videos, bloodbaths, Rihanna, every single big star, Eminem taking a bath in blood, Tupac Shakur, bath in blood,
Katy Perry, Dark Horse, the whole Katy Perry,
every single one of them. Now,
oh my God! I'm so glad I stopped watching TV in like 90 something.
Okay, so the kids are watching this. This is science fiction becoming reality. If we don't believe in the devil, okay, then it's science fiction becoming reality. But if we do believe in the devil, then it's reality becoming more in our face, obvious. Okay, this is spiritual. If you want to believe in the spiritual side of things going on as well. Now, the culmination going on here, I posted something. I don't want to get too deep into that direction, but Isaac Asimov's son, I posted that before this talk. There's some stuff that happened with him in regards to Mueller letting him off as well. Actually, I'll just say it. He ran the biggest child pornography. He had the largest stash of child pornography ever found in California. And it was hushed. And it was
now that's the
Mueller.
future. What?
Mueller hushed it. Okay, that's the future of Isaac Asimov's son.
What?
So that was his future. Now, we can talk about reality, and we can talk about all this stuff that's being hidden, and we can talk about Jeffrey Epstein and him being gone, or we can talk about the situation of millions of babies being killed yearly, and this actual reality of the spiritual or the physical reality of these babies being killed. It's Moloch is the name of the one god. There's another god for killing babies, but okay, so Moloch or whatever. Now you fast forward and you look at all this shit that's going on, and all these people. Alex Jones is talking about going inside of the Bohemian Grove, and this is science fiction becoming reality, right? Or it's us writing reality, or it's just people flocking towards this direction and attention seeking, and people are seeking attention and putting attention towards it. Now, the more shows you watch on Hulu, Netflix, and all those shows, you're going to see that a lot of them have to do like with Black Mirror, brain interface reality with your phones and things like that. That's a reality that's being pushed on us. And I think
but
personally,
that's the sales. Yeah, that's what I was saying about like things like this, like DMT, outer body experience. We know that these things are electrical phenomenon. By taking them out of that, you ruin this you make this disconnect happen. I grew up in an environment where lots of DMT, ayahuasca people, and it's done in complete isolation of the fact that there's a physical correlation to all these events.
Yeah. Now, why is Joe Rogan pushing DMT and ayahuasca, specifically DMT? I don't know, but I would listen to something saying that it could be because he's urging a lot of people to do that. That's kind of like the primitive mind of the Aztecs, or when they were taking ayahuasca and stuff and led each other into bloody battles. And I don't know. I don't see where someone was trying to put the correlation there.
Alan Watts said something great about Huxley. He was talking about Huxley with Aldous Huxley's widow, Alan Watts, the philosopher, and was talking about how lots of people have the psychedelic experience with no context, and it doesn't mean anything. Lots of people can take LSD and acid and have a trip and think they saw something. If you have no knowledge that you bring into it, then you won't get anything out of it. It's the same thing with practice. You could practice guitar for 10,000 hours incorrectly and still suck. You have to practice right. So there is nuance with everything. That's why I'm saying like the reason Joe Rogan, these people are popular is it's so nuanced. They do portray themselves as all-knowing, all-thinking people who have discovered everything. Therefore, when they say something like DMT or they scoff at Electric Universe, it's way more damaging. It's the same thing with Netflix and Hulu. I'm not disagreeing. I think that's why I started. I've given Neil and Rick such a hard time about about Babylon 5 and Stargate and Star Wars and Star Trek, because once you create such an idolatry to these properties, when these properties say something, you're like, yeah, I know electric cosmology is a good idea, but Star Wars says there are hyperdrives, and that word is way sexier, and there's smoke and glow effects behind it.
Well,
and this other
Rick and
thing
Morty's talking about this too. I mean,
lecture.
Everything we're talking about is literally Dan Harmon's Rick and Morty coming to a final conclusion of the end of the paradigm. Like Rick and Morty's pretty much every single end of the paradigm thing. Like basically, if what everyone says is true, then Rick and Morty is true. You know what I mean?
Wasn't Tales from the Citadel the real one that stood out to everybody?
Of course, everyone loves Tales from the Citadel.
Because of the Rick's wafers. It's the Rick's, it's the wafers. It's the play into
Simply
nostalgia,
Ricks.
into basically selling you.
Now.
What?
It's called Simply Ricks.
Yeah, Simple Ricks. It's like, but when people look at that, watch it, laugh, and then continue to behave in that way, that's what I'm talking about context. There's something to watch Rick and Morty, to chuckle at Simple Ricks, and to say, oh shit, that is something that occurs in culture. Let me work towards understanding that. Versus, wow, that was a great Rick and Morty episode, and move on. These guys are not dumb. These guys are very smart. I think the same thing with all these politicians. Oh, he's an idiot. He's a moron. These guys are not morons. They're not dumb. They just have different intentions. So the Rick and Morty wafer company, whatever, is trying to basically sell to people. And so why would they ever let this guy actually have a moment of freedom? But I think Buddy's point is the fact that the universe behaves that way naturally in order to create novelty. So destruction and baby killing and all these terrible things that we live in are natural events to create the beneficence that follows. I think it's
but novelty.
Right, which
That's all I have to
creates you. Well, this is what I'm doing on this tiny little show
Huxley, yes.
to a group of people, saying, "Hey, man, like it's really unpopular to say that popular culture is not as cool as unpopular culture, but really, and if you go to a city, you call a friend, you're like, what's the best place that nobody knows about so I can
Yeah.
eat there? Like,
It's-
who's the guy who's the best guy to go to the best club? Popularity is not actually a metric of success and goodness or
you've
or
literally
whatever.
defined my how I go to other countries. Like, it's like, are you going to take the tour? No, I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to go down to the crappiest part of town. I'm going to ask somebody where would they go for a drink, and that's where I'm going.
Okay, so to me, Star Wars, Star Trek, unfortunately, are McDonald's, and the Electric Universe, Halton Arp's one of 4 talks that somehow exist on YouTube. That one lecture of Halton Arp is like that super cool Filipino family-run restaurant in the bad part of town. And I always go to that Filipino restaurant, and I definitely don't hit up the fast food chain first. You know what I mean? It's like, that's why, like, yeah, you can appreciate McDonald's and Subway and all these things, but really you want to go to that family cooked, 21 ingredient chocolate mole that the grandmother cooked up, not, your generic mac and cheese packet lunch. I don't know. I mean, that's just me. Maybe I'm an elitist, so I'll have to eat that. But
I think we're all elitists in a sense because we're different. We're the odd ones. We're the weird ones because we actually care.
That's what I've been told. I like
But
that.
the thing of it is the mass is not going to. They're not going to bend their head or break their brain or anything. Their followers, and the bad people, whatever, or
Whatever we want to call them.
just, yeah, what do you want? The bad organization. Let's say it. The death cult has got them by the throat, and we're going to try to wrestle that away from them, not to get to make a lot of money, but simply to change the subject about let's go into a living cosmology, not this death cult, not this thing that says consciousness doesn't exist. That's our job, and once we do that, and we are the establishment, let's forget pretending that we can get these guys to reform. They're committed, and they're not going to change.
That's like trying to overthrow the church.
Right. You have to do it.
But remember, we all still talk about Martin Luther, so sometimes rebellion matters.
But like I say, we're it. We have to overthrow this paradigm. And if we don't, I mean, Lord God, we got the electrical engineers to do it first, and then we got the plasma physics guys, and these are the last holdouts. We're going to do it, but at what cost?
Look, this guy, Patrick Moore, interviewing Halton Arp right now, right? Mm-hmm. I've watched 100 episodes with Patrick Moore. You could tell that he was one of those cats where you're like, did he really know about this, or was he really trying to be discerning? So there was a time, and I think in the past 50, 100 years, where there were people of the media, of the press, who were like, well, they were pushing the popular theory, but they were very validly questioning the opposing
I also
thoughts.
got to stress, by the way, guys, that American television, and I'm not trying to say this in a really bad way, because other countries are very bad too, like India and other places, but not trying to judge that way, but I meant the focus on markets, concision, and demographics and all that type of thing, and has introduced so many things to your media that you don't have, like, if you were in Norway, for example, this thing right here that we're watching would be broadcast in its entirety all in one shot. And you would sit down and watch the whole thing. And they still do that today, 1 hour long programs about what the world is like, and you don't get that nearly as much in a world where everything's coming at you so fast and you need 5 minutes and you're supposed to know everything in 5 minutes.
Look, but I'm on the edge of the media stuff, and you see that Netflix, Hulu, these people are trying to break into markets all over the world. The influence of U.S. media is extremely powerful and virulent, right? But what I'm trying to say is that there's a tiny group of people that I've noticed. So for example, when I saw Halton Arp or Symbols of an Alien Sky or any of these videos, I mean, I was clapping. I was freaking out. I was like, wow, people have actually thought about these things that I thought I was crazy for considering. And when I watch people like Vsauce and like Joe Rogan, I'm fuming the whole time. Oh, it's great that you brought Rod Serling, because he made an episode about this whole idea that when the aliens were outside of town fucking with people and making them fight among each other. I think, which episode is that? The Town, is it? Where the neighbors turn on one another, and then the last shot is the aliens up on a hill being like, we don't need to do anything. They'll kill each other just by the thought of
that was
the
a
thought
very
of us
good
existing. So Rod, but he was alone in that. Rod Serling, like one of the few writers who was actually saying, you know what, I got a ton of money. He had won like 10 Peabodys or something, and he's like, there's a whole interview on how he started Twilight Zone and how it was a super big risk, but he's like, I want to tell these stories that the network doesn't want me to tell. And even he's like playing into the military-industrial complex, the day the Earth stood still. But there were forms of media. Basically, Joe Rogan has made his living on telling people, look, I'm a big, beefy, hunky dude, and I've done a ton of psychedelic drugs. A lot of people relate to that. And if you get 1 million views, it doubles down on your platform. But he's like a popular movie. Popular movies are not truth. They're movies. But no one ever puts them in that context. It's the same thing with like Rihanna. Rihanna's an excellent, amazing pop star. She's not an artist. She's not a musician.
I think that Joe Rogan is probably going to do a big. Google said that they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that Donald Trump is not going to win. Now there's ballots out saying that Joe Rogan, they want him to mediate or ameliorate the conference or whatever it is. Debate. Either way, he's going to. Either way, he's going to. On his channel, or whether we like it or not, he's going to. He already had Tulsi Gabbard on twice. I don't know where she's at in the whole picture of things. But if you think about what really happened at the last election, it was a guy in jail and the most famous guy who's been banned from YouTube, who swung it. Julian Assange with WikiLeaks and Alex Jones, they doubled down and did something called black psychology. And the black psychology is to use dark spiritual forces and dark spiritual ideas to win or lose debates, and the Nazis did this. And they also did this with Nostradamus, with fake Nostradamus predictions in the past. Many times people have been using Nostradamus. Still to this day, they use false Nostradamus predictions. But what I'm saying here is that Joe Rogan continues to swing things and change stuff. He's an influencer. And whether we like it or not, Alex Jones and everybody, he was the most watched person on YouTube.
I watched Jones in 2001. Yeah, Alex Jones
way
when
back
he had
when,
got into Bohemian Grove.
97.
The media hated that because all of our attention was on him. And the media wanted those viewers, so they had to destroy him. And Joe Rogan wanted some of them too, and everybody else wanted a piece of the pie. So they had to split it up, and they divided. Either way, he's used just like that guy who did Fahrenheit 9/11 is used.
Controlled opposition.
Yeah. So.
Mind flayer. I mean, Disney is the mind flayer. Like you're saying, get rid of.
We're supposed to be talking about the future, not the scary past, right?
No, but I just mean like they co-opted. They co-opted Joe Rogan before. He used to question the moon landings constantly, and then all of a sudden did that flip. There's a co-opting period.
He started with Disney.
Yeah, but I used to question the moon landing until I actually did more research.
I'm just saying, like it's about a dialogue. Like I agree, the moon landings were real, but there's a much bigger story to that.
I'm not sure about the first one, but the rest of them, I'm pretty sure.
Well, either way, I think questioning things, the mentality of questioning things versus just being like, we believe what Neil deGrasse believes, therefore we're validated, therefore anything we say after this point comes with that weight. I think there's a sense of it with pop culture. Rihanna becomes a superstar based on manufactured pop ideals with other people writing the songs and creating her image. She's a child. They make her into a superstar. Now what she sells is makeup, t-shirts, and political ideas. She's not a valid source for that. I mean, yeah, you could say anybody's a valid source, but because somehow somebody sells 1 million records, all of a sudden makes their viewpoint on food more valid than another person. That's idiotic. But that's what our culture actually is. I'm saying people like Joe Rogan should make money and should be super popular, but it does not make him the be all end all of information. And that's what it's become. Look at these comments on good channels. You should be on Joe Rogan. What about you, idiot?
Yeah.
You should listen to this information and appreciate it, not tell that person to go be on Joe Rogan as some sort of validator. Screw that. Sorry, I'm being passionate just because this is so touchy to me.
Well, we're about to wrap up aneway because I got to get going because it's Thanksgiving. So,
Neil, real quick.
Of course.
Can I make one last comment? So, Dr. Richard Lamberski, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, established with us communications media students back in 1987 something very key, and it was the end of the story. The program itself fills in space between the advertising, not the advertising filling in the space in the show itself. So when you talk about patrons, sponsors, that's the way the media works.
They're selling you an audience to advertisers, yes. And they want to really condition their audience. That's a bad problem. Because that's basically influencing their thoughts. And that's not
right.
Yeah.
And corporatism and corporations have to choose a left or a right side, and we saw this within the last decade a lot with what is Target going to choose, left or right? What's this big company going to choose, left or right? And they're polarizing our thoughts and our actions based off of corporatism and corporations.
A lot of countries are fighting back against that, though. I mean, Europe does, obviously, and we clearly do. It's a bad thing.
If I could just direct us right to electricity again.
Sure.
And the future of electricity and electric futurism and electric futurists. Like, what's really happening here is all this shit that we've been talking about is distractions, and they've been like distractions to lead people away from what's really going on. Now, what's really going on is the most valuable man, according to Neil deGrasse Tyson this last week, is Elon Musk, the most valuable man on the planet. Now, this guy has been propped up by how many different organizations and how many companies does he run? And it's just, okay, so let me get straight to the point. What's happening here is it's all electric. Everything is electric. All of his companies are gearing towards and already are electric. So they're having us talk about all this other crap whilst at the same time building the future, the electric grid, the 5G, everything with these telecommunication companies, and they're not even talking about how it's all electric. It's there, but the future is there, and we're going there already. But there's really they're talking about gravity and all this other stuff still, you know.
Yeah, but the way that we grab that the whole audience is to bring Armstrong said, bring everybody in, but bring the mystics, bring the healers, bring everybody. And when we get the top people and get them to stop using unconsciously this materialistic philosophy and embrace a cosmology of life, that everything is conscious and everything's alive, then that paradigm will switch. Then we've got them. I gotta say. That's all I gotta say.
No, that's fair.
I also just want to apologize. Also, if I insulted anybody who watches these cats, I don't mean to pinpoint or target anybody, or even Joe Rogan. I don't know this guy, so or Michael. I don't know them.
He's lying. He does. He totally points at them and laughs at them all the time.
I don't laugh at them. I just want to make
kidding.
sure. No, No, I'm really, it is a very touchy subject just because, like, it's something that held me back from embracing the electric universe for a lot of years because I was so stuck in that ideal of quantum mechanics and stuck in the idea that people like Brian Greene, Neil deGrasse Tyson were so confident and so loudly decried alternative concepts that people while at one side it does make you think.
It's intentionally complex when it doesn't need to be. You're right. There's simpler answers out there, and you should at least defer to experts, and not to intentionally ignore experts who are telling you something. Smacks of, especially when you can't get there and do any tests. You know, you're basically telling someone's imagination or telling someone's experiments and actual work is less impressive than their imaginings of what's going on in space. How can you be so friggin' full of crap? Like, I mean, you know, like that.
Ultimately, I'm kind of trying to get back to really, like, when I saw Velikovsky talk on Bonds of the Past, or somebody like Halton Arp, or somebody like Wal Thornhill. These are the people that should have them, you know, quote unquote, have a million viewers.
Yes.
But those are the people that I don't want to say idolize, but I listen to, and man, I'm overwhelmed by a sense of gratitude and commitment to information. We have so much sci-fi is really what I was saying on our last call, Neil, offline.